All right, so we were just chit-chatting, but we're ready to get going on episode 18 of the Marcus Hour. We have an exciting one today, a very relevant topic to the accessory dwelling units and kind of its interplay with what we've been seeing in Massachusetts, what we've been seeing with condos and HOAs, and what our guest today has seen in Rhode Island and what he's been doing with his company as a way to stay ahead of the curve with what's happening in the accessory dwelling unit or ADU industry. So without further ado, or without further ADU, I present to you our two guests, or our guest today, on top of our regular panel of the Marcus Hour, of myself, Jake Marcus, and the famous Stephen Marcus, and we today have Bill Finnegan. Bill, thanks for joining.
Absolutely. Thanks for letting me join you.
Yeah,
Talk.
absolutely. So it should be a good conversation about all the developments we've been seeing. Again, per usual, feel free to drop in any questions as the kind of seminar goes on. Just to give you a background on kind of what we do, we're Alcock and Marcus, a full service condo and HOA specialty firm, but also wades into other areas of real estate and development. Land use zoning is also included in that, and there has been a lot of zoning changes to the Massachusetts law recently. We practice in Rhode Island, Massachusetts, Florida, Maine, and New Hampshire. Today we'll mostly be talking about, we'll discuss all 5 states, but we'll mostly be discussing the new zoning developments in Massachusetts, as it relates to ADUs or accessory dwelling units, as well as what we'll kind of touch on what's happened in Rhode Island and what Bill has seen in Rhode Island. So let's get to, I want to share my screen just so we have the PowerPoint we're going to be presenting today. And so this is who we got today. We got Bill Finnegan, President and CEO of Coventry Lumber, which is it a branch of Finetco, Bill?
Yes, Finetco is the parent company, if you will, and we operate Coventry Lumber in Coventry, Rhode Island, E.L. Morse in Wareham, Mass, and West Haven Lumber in West Haven, Connecticut. So all three of those lumber yards operate under the Finetco flag, if you will.
And for those who might not know what a lumberyard is, I mean, I'm sure most people do, hopefully, but can you just describe what a lumberyard is?
Sure. We work with custom home builders, developers, homeowners, and we offer basically everything from the foundation up, from siding, windows, roofing, flooring, interior doors, kitchen design, engineering support for roof trusses and floor systems, exterior decking and railings, basically everything you would need for building or renovating a construction project from the foundation up.
Excellent. And you've recently been doing things with ADUs, correct?
Yes, we had a interest over the last couple of years, increased interest in ADUs, which is, as we all know, just a label that's been put on an additional home or a structure on a property. So we've been dealing with those for years, but with the label of ADU and trying to streamline that process, we've been trying to get ahead of that curve.
Excellent. That's good to know. Yes, and we'll be discussing kind of the best practices, as well as kind of next steps in the implementation of and regulation of ADUs and what we can kind of see going forward. And what at least we'll be discussing, generally about ADUs, what the new law means, but we'll also be discussing the interplay with condos, or HOAs, and we'll kind of get into, the different types of ADUs, what types of ADUs that Coventry Lumber offers as part of their package, and kind of what the process is in creating an ADU at your property. And I think as far as condos, the biggest thing we'll want to kind of be discussing is how do you regulate, how do you, what are your kind of, how do you make sure it's done right? How do you make sure that you're not overstepping or prohibiting outside of the law? And kind of just getting into, especially as these ADUs become more accessible. So the next slide, and there's you, Bill, your mugshot right here. If you want to reach out to Bill directly, we have his contact information, bfinnegan@finetco.net. Also can reach out to Ryan, that's your son, correct?
Yes, I have,
One.
I have three sons in the business, Sean, Ryan, and Evan, and Ryan is the one primarily focused in sales.
Very good.
So, and
So
then
Art
Dan
Finnegan,
LaCroix is on our executive management team, and he's our main point of contact for the ADU initiative that we have going on, and he works out of the corporate office in Coventry, Rhode Island.
excellent. Okay, so those will be your people to go to as far as, learning more about what goes into these ADUs and kind of the process in getting one on your property, or figuring out how it can be regulated on your property. So
Jay, could I take a small step back?
go right ahead.
Okay, thanks, Jake. So affordable housing units and housing units in general. If we take Massachusetts, I think we're like 175,000 or 250,000 units short of where we should be. Across the country, there are issues, depending on the state, with a lack of housing, both affordable and market rate. And in addition to that, we have people either when they retire are on fixed incomes, or to keep, say, in a specific town, firefighters and teachers, so that they can afford to live in the town that they work. The idea of additional income or an expanded family, in-law apartments, etc., has come up as one way of states dealing with local government. So what we're talking about today, what we're looking at today, is really sort of a crystal ball. So what the legislature, for example, in Massachusetts passed a couple of weeks ago, in the early morning hours of the last day of July, so the last day of the legislative session, was a law that prohibits cities and towns from restricting ADUs under certain circumstances. So we just want to make it clear at the beginning that the law, for example, in Massachusetts, is not the law, a law that says that a condominium unit owner in a 10-story high-rise is able to start building out and up, that your condominium documents are going to detail what can be done and can't be done. But we think that over time, the developers may come in with products that do have these ADU units. And now we're thinking of not just condominiums, but think of homeowner associations and property owner associations and landowner associations, where each owner owns their lot and there is the ability to expand. So we think it's something that, for your crystal ball, that you should at least be aware of, because eventually these things seem to affect private agreements, such as condominium associations and homeowner associations. Back to you, Jake.
Yep, absolutely. So that's a good backdrop. I think ADUs, yeah, no matter what you call them, whether it's in-law houses, whether it's second units, accessory apartments, the the expansion of them has been tremendous over the last kind of, I guess, few years, definitely, but has been extending for years and years. There was actually a case study by Community Association Institute, CAI, providing some insight as to what has led to, you know, the response of the suburban sprawl, the socioeconomic demographics, the different changes across regions that have led to this kind of uh, venture. But yeah, I guess to dumb it down even more, or take it down a step even more, is what are ADUs? Small independent living units that are inside, attached to, or detached, but on the same parcel as a primary residence, that have the potential to address a variety of housing related challenges like affordability, equity, and environmental issues. Moreover, because ADUs generally are small infill units, they can achieve these gains without significantly altering the character of existing residential neighborhoods. So that's kind of why we at least see it as a chance where condos and HOAs and community associations really are at the forefront of this, and it's really prevalent in condos and HOAs and in townhomes. Yeah, and as the definition kind of mentioned, they could be interior, they could be attached to, they could be detached, but they're on the same property. So you wouldn't see them as much in a high rise, but you could see them in more sprawling, especially suburban areas. Typically, the most often, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Bill, where you see these is typically an attic, garage, or basement, or just land that's adjacent to the property. Is that correct?
Yeah, most of the ones that we've seen have been um, either additions onto an existing home or a separate dwelling on the property. Now, you know, what we have been, a lot of our contractors deal with garage renovations or attic renovations or basement renovations, but we wouldn't label that as an ADU on what we've done so far. But so most of the involvement we've had have been those separate units.
Got it. No, that makes sense. And what area? I mean, I know you're in Rhode Island. Have you done much in Mass yet, or is that still kind of new? Or
No, that's been again, the label ADU is new. We've done additions on properties and renovations for years at all of our locations, but as an ADU labeled project, we have not had one in Massachusetts yet identified as an ADU.
okay,
And just to clarify, I don't want there to be any confusion. All of the projects that we've worked on have been with homeowners and not with condo associations. So I don't want to give a misrepresentation to anyone on this call that this is something that we've seen a movement with condo or property development.
got it.
Have you done anything with, for example, using the existing space? Can you take, for example, a 2 or 3 car garage and make that into something, or are you saying these as additions, separate structures, or within the existing structure?
Ours have been a new structure, so they're not converting a garage. But again, Stephen, we've been involved in all those projects, but under this ADU initiative, they've been additional space, separate space, detached space, and the conversion of the attics or the garages or the basements would be more of just a project that gets done without any significant communication to us. So if that answers your question.
And I think the other thing to point out that Bill informed us of during our discussions leading up to today were he's not his company is not selling anything. In other words, his being a guest is not because he has a direct product that he is looking to sell, but rather I assume it's that he has come up with ideas and lumber and all for contractors and homeowners, etc. Have a place of it being supplied. Do you get involved in like the designs, Bill, or do people tell you what this is what we would like to do?
Yeah, well, we do sell all of the materials that are needed for these
Alright.
projects, and what we, if we're going to jump ahead a little bit, we've put together some standard specs that we can provide to customers to come in, and if the layouts and the designs that we have fit their exact need, we can provide them with stamped drawings that take them through the whole process of, basically our primary customers have been Mr. and Mrs. whoever that want to add this on to their home for whoever it is or for an investment. And we have as you can see in front of us right now, the kitchen design and a roof truss spec, the floor system spec, and we can accelerate or streamline that entire process where they're basically picking colors, and we've lined up contractors. We even have a few architects involved if there needs to be a modification, and that whole process could be, it never has been, but it could be as quick as same day if they're ready and one of our standard designs fits their need perfectly. But Stephen, you said something, and I'm on the panel, so I don't mean to introduce more questions. But when you took a step backwards, it's interesting what you were talking about with these condo associations and these developments, because I don't know if there's a limit as to how many ADUs can be on a property, but it certainly could be a cost-effective way for these properties to supplement their income, because they don't have all of the size requirements and the requirements of an additional unit, and a development may be able to add on multiple ADUs as rental income opportunities. So I personally know a few developers that's an interesting point that I got out of what you had to say.
Yeah, I think that's a really good segue into kind of where we kind of see this being kind of an opportunity for at least what we've been seeing in Massachusetts and what we've been seeing with the Boston pilot program, an opportunity where there's a lot more affordable housing. So before I get to that, I kind of just wanted to talk about, or actually let me get a little bit to the backdrop of or just going back to the history of how we got to where we are today. Interestingly, in this U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development case study, there were 6 programs or 6 case studies of example ADUs or ordinances and programs that they looked at in the mid 2000s. I believe it was 2007 or 2008, or mid to late 2000s. And basically, there were three separate towns within Massachusetts out of 6 that they looked at, that were in, or 6 programs that they looked at, and 3 were in Massachusetts. The 3 that weren't in Massachusetts were Portland, Oregon, Santa Cruz, California, and Fourier County, Virginia. The 3 in Massachusetts were Lexington, Massachusetts, Barnstable, Massachusetts, and Wellfleet, Massachusetts, interestingly enough. And the way they looked at these 3 regions, ranging in kind of socio-demographic, ranging in space. I have two on the Cape technically, Barnstable, which consists of a lot of villages. But Wellfleet, which was considered more kind of a elderly demographic, and had a lot more zoning board of appeals obstacles compared to the other two. Whereas Lexington has a complete range of housing choices and population diversity. So I found that interesting that 3 Massachusetts states already have had kind of an ADU program in place or ordinances in place that have kind of obviously developed in the state over time, but have been in place since the early to or mid to late 2000s. Stephen, I know you've been to Wellfleet a few times, right?
Yes, I have, Jake.
Tell me about what you know about Wellfleet.
Um, I only know about if you look at a map of Massachusetts, there's a finger that points out, and it's has water on both sides, and that's known as Chequesset Neck Road.
Right here.
And the and the issues are have been heavy erosion issues that have hammered the shoreline, but in our involvement with Wellfleet, what's interesting is that Jake mentioned seniors living in Wellfleet. There are a lot of people who have homes in Wellfleet that they may have owned since 1960s, and the houses have gone up dramatically in value. So now you have people coming in, tearing down homes, putting up new homes, and the town of Wellfleet gets involved in those kind of issues. But the other issues are real estate taxes go up. So what do you do if you bought a house in 1960 in Wellfleet for $30,000 that's sitting on an acre or two of land and is now worth $3 million, but your job, let's say, as a school teacher or firefighter, and you're nearing retirement, and the amount of taxes is too much to be affordable. I think that's where ADUs may come into play for some people. It may give them ability either with extended family or by additional income with an ADU to be able to stay in Wellfleet so that they're not forced to move out. I'm not sure if that's the question you were directed at Jake, but that's the best answer I can give.
Well, if I could just jump in and add on to what you just said, Stephen, in those 2 particular areas, and actually all of the Cape, you know, a 1-bedroom unit in Wellfleet during the summer would probably rent for $8,000 to $10,000 a week. So I think I know a fair amount of people that own real estate on the Cape, and they have been very restrictive. Certainly adding on another unit at any structure was never going to be allowed. And now with this new ADU law, if they're able to do that and they can not move out of their home for the summer or move into this smaller unit for the summer and rent out the big house, that's what I've heard from actual homeowners of what their thoughts are, what they're going to do with this on the Cape specifically.
Okay. And I did like the graphic you gave of Massachusetts of you were giving a
Yes. Yes, yeah, I'm very familiar with the landscape on the Cape, and I always offer that visual. Thank you.
Sometime after this call, Jake and I will get on the phone with you and talk about our Wellfleet experience. It's sort of an interesting case study in itself. But that's kind of interesting that somebody who's, say, on fixed income, or is of modest means in terms of the income that they make, with an ADU that costs X, can now have the potential for 13 weeks during the summer to charge $8,000 to $10,000 a week. That's a game changer in terms of being able to afford the taxes and the cost of living and all that, so you don't have to move out of the town that you've lived at your whole life. If you bought something in 1960, it very well could have been for $30,000. We know of condominiums in Boston, Beacon Street, for $20,000 or $30,000 back in 1972, and obviously jumped up dramatically. But the ability of paying the cost and the cost of living and the taxes, this can be a solution for a bunch of people.
So,
Jake,
yeah.
somebody asked, and tell me whether it's too early for the question. Somebody asked whether a town can choose to ignore the Massachusetts law. I assume the answer is no.
Can the town choose to ignore the Mass ADU law? If it's in line with the footprint and meets the requirements, I don't think it can be denied. I believe under the new law, so ADUs will not need local zoning approval, because the unit, or if the units are smaller, of either 900 square feet or half the square footage of the primary home. And the law also says no municipality shall unreasonably restrict or require a special permit or other discretionary zoning approval for the use of land or structures for a single accessory dwelling or rental thereof in a single family residential zoning district. The law also says it's an or to qualify, or what properties are eligible, it has to be as of right, and it has to meet the following requirements, which are: the ADU must be built within the existing footprint of the main home, which means you cannot extend any part of the existing home for the sole purpose of converting it to an ADU. The primary structure must be a single family home, duplex, or triplex. You must occupy the same home in which the ADU is built. And if you intend on building a basement or first floor ADU, the structure must be above the base flood elevation if your home is in the FEMA flood zone. So those are kind of the parameters that would provide the backdrop.
So you have to comply with the no, you can't say that as a municipality, you can't say no, we're not going to comply with that. But Jake, you're saying that there are certain areas where the law says that a town does not have to allow certain expansions on the property. But basically the answer is that you have to comply with the law, but that does not mean that every homeowner who comes to a town with an idea, for example, to take up every square inch of the lot with ADUs, can do that they must comply with the law.
Yeah, so I still think if it was subject to an inspectional services department review, there are still other requirements within an ADU is required to have everything required for independent living, which includes full utilities, full kitchen, full bathroom, bedroom or sleeping area with an emergency egress, at least 2 means of egress, ceiling height of at least 7 feet 6 inches for a duplex or triplex home adding an ADU, and 7 foot for a single family home adding an ADU. So I think, yeah, I mean, you'd still be subject to those requirements. But yeah, as I mean, how I read the may not unreasonably restrict or prohibit, I kind of see that as you don't need to now apply for special permits or there's basically less kind of I guess is a way to put it, hoops and ladders to jump through to get approval of these.
Yeah,
And-
if I
and-
could,
and
if I
what-
could,
Go ahead.
what we've seen is for the single family um, homeowners, for them to turn their home into a two-family unit was, if not impossible, very laborious to get through the process. This allows them to, by right, have that right, but you still, there was one question that came up about excuse me, setbacks. The ADU laws that the way we understand it, it doesn't, you can't, if you want to infringe on a setback requirement, you have to go to zoning and planning, and you have to go through that entire process. So it doesn't allow you to increase your zoning, lot coverage, or setbacks, or any of those issues that need to be dealt with. The ADU doesn't alleviate any of that. But if you don't have a setback issue and you don't have a lot coverage issue, by right, you're able to add this second dwelling unit on your property. And I think that Boston, this one that you have up right now, Jake, so this is saying it needs to be from existing space. Most of the ones that we've had experience with has been existing additional space. So that I don't know if that's specific in Boston, if that's what you've seen, or if that's mass wide. I'm not sure.
Yeah, so I did want to get into yeah, there's the Boston pilot program as well as the Massachusetts law, which basically says as far as in-law apartments, ADUs are now legal in all Massachusetts single family zones. And yeah, that's where the new law provides that the no zoning ordinance or shall prohibit or unreasonably restrict or require a special permit. We did get a question about the cost to the unit owner. So as kind of just a very generic baseline, as far as what can you do to kind of provide for some type of restrict or not regulation, rather than, I'm not going to say restrict or prohibit, but how do you regulate the inclusion of an ADU or the addition of an ADU? Probably the most simple answer, or the most generic advice that I could give. Obviously, we're trying to cast a wide net, and if you're seeking specific legal advice, it's important to ask counsel about the specifics of that requirement. But as it relates to figuring out how to regulate ADUs, I would say you want to amend your bylaws, amend your governing documents, and kind of add in rules and regulations as it relates to common areas. As to who's responsible for paying, and if you need a new electrical service or a new walkway, as long as it's within the footprint of the ADU, from my understanding, if this is happening within if it has to relate to the common areas, that would be outside the footprint of what an ADU requires. But if it adds on to the electrical service, I believe if there's a way to equitably apportion the cost, then yeah, those should be borne by the unit owner. Stephen, what do you think about that? That's an interesting question.
Yeah, I think the Boston pilot program is going to be a little different because Boston is sort of crunched for space. So it makes perfect sense that there are lots of areas in Boston where expanding up and out isn't possible. But let's say that you go to some of the areas in possibly southeast Dorchester, where there might be a little more land, it would seem that if you were constructing um, uh, an ADU, which requires more costs because of utility service or because it's serving more people, I think that it would be possible to allocate the cost to the owner. But I think to take a step back on this, I'm going on the assumption that in most cases, the current, if it's a condominium versus a homeowner association or property owners association or landowners association, that in most condominiums in Massachusetts, most documents wouldn't permit the ADUs, and therefore, if there were an ability of owners to amend the documents to permit them, they could also say that it'll be conditioned upon any increased costs being allocated to the unit owner who creates the ADU. So I think for most of the people on the call, if you're dealing with managing a condominium, right now, if somebody said, "Oh, I'm going to build out and do an ADU," I think the answer in most cases is going to be you're not allowed to do that. The documents don't permit it. I think over time, state government and maybe in sprawling suburbs, that more thought will be given to amending documents to permit this. Speaking of which, Jake, there's somebody asking from the Berkshires asking a question, and the particular person wants to go into a deeper dive in terms of what this new law does. It sounds like the person might live or have an ADU in a place in the Berkshires, and the problem is that without the ADU, the ability to stay in the town would be very difficult, and wants to take a deeper dive with you on it. So I would suggest to that person, if you email Jake at all right, is your cell phone okay, Jake?
Go right ahead.
Okay. It's property manager, condominium manager, but it sounds like the circumstances are personal. Jake's cell is 508-333-6416, and the person asking the question about their issue in the Berkshires, where they want to have the ability to have the ADU. That's the only way of staying in that community. Jake would be happy to speak to you at no charge and talk as long as you would like.
Absolutely, happy to. And we'll also include, we'll include the requirements and kind of the process that I've been describing. I did want to get back to the so just to kind of lay the picture. In Boston, obviously a kind of increased housing costs, not much real estate left. There was Mayor Wu's kind of pilot program, which has already launched about 130 ADUs, and there's supposedly 100 or so on the way. And yeah, I think the biggest thing is that this is kind of a way to increase the efficiency and effectiveness of living. And I do want to get to CAI, Community Association Institute, best practices, just so you know, a majority of our attendees are condo affiliated, HOA affiliated, in one way or another. So as it relates to what CAI has stated, as their best practices, CAI supports the right of community associations to determine if ADUs should be permitted. CAI supports legislation that recognizes the core principle of self-governance and equitable sharing of common property and the expenses necessary to operate the community association housing model, while simultaneously permitting but not mandating that affordable housing be constructed on single-family lots. So yeah, definitely the core principles of kind of allowing autonomy, self-governance, while also allowing for equitable sharing, as one of our attendees had a question about how do you divvy up the cost of common property and expenses. What we've been seeing a lot, some other kind of similar analogies that we've seen big developments in are the advent of electrical vehicles, the advent of I think, Bill, we were talking about solar panels. And Bill, do you want to kind of discuss what you've seen with solar panels a little bit?
Well, when we were discussing the requirements for new construction, we were talking about what some requirements are, and one of them that we've seen, and I assume it's the same in Massachusetts, but certainly it is the case in Rhode Island, where you have to pre-wire the home for future solar panels on the roof and for electrical charging in the garage for an electric vehicle, and also for all of your fixtures, even if the owner wants gas, for example, a gas stove or a gas dryer, they have to pre-wire for electric appliances. So it's just an additional requirement that even if the homeowner doesn't want that in their home, it's an expense that they have to incur and meet that requirement.
And I think where this all loops in is, again, think of us as predicting the future. I at least have been doing this long enough to know that if CAI national or international has a best practice in public policy about ADUs, and if my experience has been over the decades that restrictions that may start as mandates for cities and towns, what happens over time is that government gets to the point where they start to impose or attempt to impose restrictions on private communities, such as condominiums and homeowner associations. And therefore, I think the importance of what Bill pointed out to us in our discussions about this program is it's happened with solar panels. Massachusetts has a law basically saying that you can't restrict solar panels. So we would say that would only be unlimited common elements. It happened with the Telecommunications Act of 1996 with the federal government with satellite dishes, saying you can't restrict satellite dishes on an owner's exclusive use deck. It's happened with accessibility issues with the Fair Housing Amendments Act of 1988, stating that even though it's a private agreement, that the association may have to make reasonable modifications or accommodations to people within the community. So I don't think it's all that far-fetched to envision government coming up with a potential law on a state or federal level dealing with accessory dwelling units because of the critical shortage of housing stock. And that's why CAI has spent a lot of time coming up with a policy saying we understand the merits of ADUs, but there's a balance between the merits of ADUs and balancing our rights to self-governing our communities as the owners who bought into the communities want. So it's a delicate balance, but I think our prediction is that at some point, if we're seeing this at a town level, at some point, we may be seeing it at a condominium level, private
Yes.
restriction.
And yeah, that's, I mean, all of these developments, I mean, ADUs, electric vehicles, solar panels, Berto and energy efficiency, in Boston, all huge issues or not huge issues, but huge developments in the condo world. And yeah, I think just, I mean, we do have a lot of, community association or condo attendees. So involvement with CAI is also a plug that we like to give on these webinars. For the New England chapter, you can reach out to or go to caine.org, reach out to Claudette Carini, our executive director, C Carini at caine.org. And happy to kind of Claudette has helped a lot with some of the recent legislation, which includes electronic voting in Massachusetts as well. Shout out to Peter Westhaver, Matt Gaines, and Scott Erickson for also helping out to anchor that new development, electronic voting, which we have had. We did a previous Marcus Hour on electric voting, but so if you want to talk about that, I'm happy to discuss that, but I digress.
And with the digression, one thing that we can do, because we tend to, at least I do, to go off on tangents after tangent, is next week you will receive, anybody who registered will receive a copy of the PowerPoint. So we'll have Bill's information and everything from the PowerPoint screens, as well as answers to the questions that were asked either during this past hour or a couple of questions came in prior to the seminar. We'll give all registrants answers to those. And then for the person in the Berkshires, our deal is that feel free to speak to Jake, and he'll go into as much detail as possible on ADUs, and there are real life and philosophical issues in terms of such as the person from Berkshire saying it might be the only way for some people to stay in the town, and that's meritorious. So there's a bunch of information that we'll provide you that you'll get next week if we didn't answer your questions today. I know we still have a little bit of time left.
Oh, we still have 12 minutes, Stephen. You want to try to answer all the questions right now?
I tried to as we were talking.
Good job.
I want us to name another city and see if Bill can make a mock-up of it.
Maybe Florida. So yeah, that's a good segue actually to Florida. Maybe do like one of these. But no, so I did want to get to the states that we practice in.
What did you just do, Jake?
Like a Florida like wing.
The frame isn't big enough to get the full picture, but okay.
Now we've gone completely off the rails. So Florida, I did want to say, yeah, Massachusetts just passed this as of this month, earlier in August.
Or the
Technically,
yeah, I think it was the last day of July.
right. And so we went over Massachusetts, no zoning ordinance or bylaw shall prohibit, unreasonably restrict or require a special permit. It's an as of right, so there needs to be specific, you have to already have specific area already designated. You can't add an addition to your property, HOA, condo, townhome, and try to expand an ADU off into the property. Now, Rhode Island, that's only been a few months as well, right, Bill?
That's correct.
So,
Well, no. The new development in Rhode Island is that it does not need to be a family member. The ADUs were approved a couple of years ago, but the limitation was it could only be a family member that occupied the ADU. Now it's opened up to non-family members and rental income opportunities.
Okay. Okay, yeah, so similar. That makes sense. Got it. And yeah, so that's been around for a few months. Or the new development has been around for a few months as to single family. Now New Hampshire, municipal control required by state. Maine is the opposite. State law allows community associations to prohibit and regulate. I'm not sure when that was codified. The one that I found interesting is Florida. This has been statutorily under section 163.31771 since 2004. So it's been around for quite a while. And there's been changes to it up until the most recent revision was 2020. I want to show you. So I've been able to read off the statute for most states. This is the statute. That's the whole statute, or all the language in the statute for Florida. It's a full page of wording. So it tries to really jam pack everything in there. Even the beginning of the statute reads the legislature. I mean, I don't know why they would even include this. The legislature finds that the median price of homes in this state has increased steadily over the last decade and at a greater rate of increase than the median income in many urban areas. The legislature finds that the cost of rental housing has also increased steadily. And it goes on about that kind of information. I find it to be a little verbose as far as just providing the background to everything that's occurred and providing more affordability in single family in zoned areas.
Sometimes, Shake, the importance of those emergency preambles that you were reading, and that's the difference of generations. I think in terms of that one page is too much these days for you young folks.
Way too much.
I know all the time you say by typing LOL versus laughing out loud. But the emergency preambles on that long one page, sometimes for constitutional challenges, because if there's an emergency related to the reason for example, controlling rents, when we had rent control in Massachusetts, impairing with existing contracts, etc., sometimes fare better if that kind of emergency language is there. I'm just guessing as to what the Florida legislature may have been told by the attorneys at the Florida State House.
Perhaps. I mean, I'll show you another graphic. The Condo Act in Florida. This is the one in Florida. It's about we had to get a thing to bind it compared to Massachusetts. It's just a lot more dense Condo Act.
I think we would need I would need you and Bill to help me carry a copy of that. That looks very
I think I throw my back up.
Why so many laws?
We did get a question though. Does the owner need to back to Massachusetts? Does the owner need to reside in the ADU or the primary home? From what I understand, there are laws that require occupants to be related to the property owner. But the state law does not have that restriction. So it allows ADUs on properties not occupied by the owner, as long as the ADU only has one parking space allotted to it. That's my understanding of the of that requirement.
And then there was another question where somebody said, well, gee, on reasonable modifications in Massachusetts, such as putting a ramp so that the residents can get into a unit, that under the Massachusetts fair housing law, the condominium association is responsible for the cost if it's reasonable. the person asking the question said, well, gee, I think that for ADUs, any additional cost should be that of the unit owner, not the association. And I think the answer would be that we agree. But be careful if you go from ADU into reasonable modifications with things such as ramps and the like. The law is pretty clear in Massachusetts that the association pays the cost for the modifications to the common areas.
Yes, and so I wanted to, well, let's spend the last few minutes just going over, so the Boston pilot program, it does, or even Massachusetts, I believe, the law will require homeowners to go through kind of a process from start to finish, which includes the design, permitting, reviews, and construction. That's kind of where Coventry Lumber and the Finneco family of lumberyards can kind of assist with this process. This would be more for, I mean, I guess if you are the board, you may want to be somewhat. I mean, if you have rules and regulations, or if you have amended the governing documents to allow for regulation of ADUs, the tricky part is if it's happening within a unit. But anyways, I wanted to go through the ADU process as Bill kind of sees it. So those interested in kind of building an ADU,
Oh, I thought Bill was leaving.
you got two, yeah.
No, it fell, the plug fell out of the wall. I apologize for that.
That's okay.
So those interested in building an ADU on their property, they'll receive Finetco's 4 basic design packets containing elevations, basic dimensions, floor plans, and basic kitchen design. Once a design is chosen, Finetco will provide the customer with full prints, engineering stamps, kitchen layouts, material takeoff, and product packets so that the selection process can begin. And then Finetco will put the customer in contact with one of their preferred contractors who are familiar with this process and can kind of provide timelines to put this in place. So that's kind of the general rundown. Bill, you want to add anything as to kind of the process that you've seen?
No, that's basically the process. And again, most of our interaction has been with either contractors building an ADU, or primarily homeowners that didn't have a good handle as to how to go about approaching this. And we wanted to streamline the entire process, like we said, with these 4 basic designs. Whether anyone actually builds one of those 4 or not is really, it doesn't matter to us. But if it happens to fit with what they're looking for, it's a very quick, easy process. And we take a lot of the unknown for the homeowners to get to a building permit in a much quicker process than typically on a new home build. So we're just trying to automate that and add some value in that process and make it easier.
Excellent. And I included a couple of just a couple of the design sketches that you'll see. This looks to be a mini house, 2-bed, van and laundry.
Yeah, so that's the kitchen and bathroom,
Okay.
that's the detail that can be provided to give the unit owner a visual of what their kitchen and what their bathrooms are going to look like. And you typically see that on a home build. And normally that takes time to develop what you're looking at right now. And whether or not that's exactly what someone wants or not, if it happens to fit with what they're looking for, the process is done, and we can issue drawings same day if someone needs something like that.
So yeah, you can see there's kind of a lot of it looks very you can see that there's a lot of detail in these designs. So yeah, basically, I mean, as I mentioned before, you want to make sure this includes the full utilities, full kitchen, full bathroom, bedroom, 2 means of egress. So you can kind of pack all this in to this area, which is I guess the goal of the ADU program.
And I'm assuming that Finetco has done these designs based on what cities and towns in Rhode Island and now Massachusetts typically would approve, but I assume that Bill would advise somebody looking into this process of adding an ADU. I assume that you advise them or the contractor to first go to the town building inspector for any permits that are needed, just to make sure that whatever's being done, for example, we mentioned if there were problems with setback and all that, you can't just build anything on the property. There's still certain guidelines that the city or town might have some say in, but now the city or town has less say in terms of they can't just deny an ADU.
Yeah, our involvement is not to circumvent any local authority as to what restrictions they may have in place. Our understanding is this new law just allows homeowners to add an additional dwelling unit on their property, but the electrical requirements and in Rhode Island, we have a lot of septic systems that has to be taken into consideration, certainly setbacks. And if there's restrictions of the aesthetics of the build of an addition in a certain development, that has to be met with. So yeah, we're trying to take it from when that you can build one and streamline that process. But everything you just talked about, Stephen, absolutely has to be considered and looked into and qualified, and nothing that we're doing supersedes or eliminates that need.
Excellent. Jake, you want to wrap it up? And again, we'll send everybody the PowerPoint. Jake, you're saving the chat for answering the questions and answers. Oh,
Yeah.
the questions will provide answers. And you should registrant should receive that sometime next week. And if you have any topics for future webinars, this one was a little different than others that we've done, and that it's sort of futuristic, in terms of something that has just passed as a requirement for cities and towns. And our prediction is at some point will become an issue that condominium associations and homeowner associations may have to deal with as well. But if you have any issues that you'd like to have as the topic of future monthly webinars, please let us know.
Yep. So feel free to send over any feedback, any questions, any further insight. And this is our contact information. And Bill Finnegan and his team, Ryan Finnegan and Dan LaCroix. Bill, we appreciate the time. We appreciate your help in putting together this presentation. Would have been lost trying to figure it out myself. So I really appreciate it, and appreciate the help.
Thanks for involving us. We appreciate it.
Absolutely. All right, everyone. Have a good rest of your day and remainder of the week. And Bill, I'll see you in Saratoga.
Yes, you will. Thanks very much.